thank you so much for joining me. This is my first Let's Talk video, and I've chosen to talk about Mordheim. So let's talk Mordheim with Stu Cresswell. Hi, Stu.
Oh yeah,
Is it okay to call you Stu or Stuart?
yeah. Everyone calls me Stu.
Lovely. So I was just saying, I am an editor for 28 magazine, which is all about the 28 hobby and the Grimdark, and you really should be reading it. It's free online. And I was asked to edit one of your articles, Stuart. So that was my first introduction to Mordheim. And I kept, before you jumped into the document to work with me, I kept going to look at the Mordheim wiki to try and figure things out. What is the website that you have written a lot of all about Mordheim?
Oh, so I've got a Warhammer themed blog, which is mostly it's pretty Mordek. And the title of the blog is actually I chose Liber Malefic, which is sort of loosely tied to the dark gods and worship of demons.
Of course. So that's what I found. I found Liber Malefic, and I was using that to reference all the things you'd written about in this essay, because I didn't know what all the supplements were or anything that you were talking about. And then I think the other editors were like, no, Mira, Stuart Cresswell is the same person. So that was really great that you kind of jumped in to edit the video with me. So if you were trying to explain Mordheim, we were in an elevator, you had like a minute to tell me what it was. How would you describe the game to me?
And role playing.
Okay. So I guess the closest thing I might have played to it is Frostgrave.
Since Mordheim was originally released in 1999, there have been numerous clones of the system, I suppose you could
Oh,
say, over the years. There have been a lot of games
interesting.
that have been published that would probably not exist in the form that they've taken
Mm,
were it not for the release of Mordheim in 1999.
okay, that's good to know. So Mordheim is the original skirmish game with its roots in
Mordheim,
Warhammer Fantasy.
Mordheim is the original fantasy skirmishing tabletop role-play game experience, so far as I'm concerned. And one of the interesting things about the game, in terms of its format, is that there's never been another edition. So there is only like one edition of the game, whereas most games that Games Workshop have published over the years have gone through many different iterations. I think there's 9 editions of Warhammer Fantasy Battle and 8 editions of Warhammer 40k that have been released over the years. There's 4 or 5, you could just say, versions of Blood Bowl. So this game that was released in 1999, everything that exists that's been released since then is all
Mm,
based on the original rule system, and that's kind of very uncommon for
hmm.
a game that has the kind of following that it has. There's a cult following that the game
Yeah.
has, which if you go on Facebook, it's just like it's unbelievable. And that's just something that's kind of exploded over the last 5 or 6 years, I would say, in terms of um, the players that have returned to the game and
Mm,
the kind of the obvious legacy of the work that was done by Tuomas Pirinen, the original studio games designer
hmm.
who used to work for Games Workshop,
Gonna write that
and
down.
his team. So he created the game. Tuomas created the game alongside other studio staff. Rick Priestley, who was one of the original co-designers of the Warhammer games. Tuomas refers to Rick affectionately as his mentor, because
Oh,
he was part of the original sort of old guard of the studio and the creation of the games that Games Workshop were making in the 1980s.
I mean,
And
Priestley sounds like a very rock and roll, sounds like someone more likely to be in a rock and roll band. And then you've got Tumas Pirami.
Tuomas Pyronin, Tuomas.
I'm sure these two people, Tumas and Rick, must be aware of you, Stuart. Have you all
I've
met?
never I've never met Tuomas in person. I've met Rick a couple of times over the years. I've met him a few times over the years, actually. And I think probably the last time I saw Rick, I began a kind of correspondence, I suppose, with Tuomas because he was active on Facebook,
Yeah.
and I sort of sent him some information and some pictures about an event I was at in Nottingham,
Mm.
which was attended by a lot of the old guard of the Warhammer scene. So Rick was there, and I sort of, like was photographed with Rick while I was chatting with Rick, and so I sort of sent that to him. I was kind of just
Oh,
thanking him for the game and kind of sending him some information. And he's very active himself on Facebook in for different projects that he's involved in, and he's very involved in the Facebook group for
mm.
Mordheim as well, to the point where he's actually been judging competitions, helping to arrange
Oh,
prizes. So has this incredible sort of level of kind of commitment to his legacy, even though the game isn't supported by Games Workshop any longer, and
no.
he doesn't work for them. He's in he's more working in the video gaming industry, and
Okay.
yeah. So some of the there is occasional sort of appearances in the Facebook group from studio ex-studio staff and stuff who've been involved in the game, and a lot of those personalities from the like that worked with Games Workshop even back as far as the 80s do attend sort of the more sort of intimate social get-togethers that kind of get arranged
Oh,
from time
lovely.
to time.
So I can imagine, I mean, I can imagine that must feel like our I'm in a group called Hackney Area Tabletop Enthusiasts, also called Hate for short. And it must be a similar feeling. We got Dan Abnett to do a book club with us. And that feeling of someone who had created Black Library literature and all these stories being with us, it gave us a real special sense, you know? So I can appreciate how lovely that must feel to have those old
I
timers
attend
kind of pop their
I
heads in.
attended that book club that you did.
Yes, this
I
is
was
so
there.
funny. So even before that essay, I mean, I was so nervous, Stuart, because I kind of bragged and said, I'm sure we can get Dan Abnett. And then we got him and I had to host him.
Yeah,
But he was lovely.
it was amazing, and I'd not met Dan Abnett myself when I'd attended some kind of book events at Warhammer World where they've had
Mm,
authors in. I went to a few of those, and I didn't actually get the opportunity to interact with Dan and sort of thank him for his work. But some of the other
mm.
authors, like some of the other kind of like the legends that have written stories for
Yeah.
Black Library were at these kind of weekender events that they used to do. Like they used to do these Black Library weekends,
Mm.
and I used to attend with my friend Ed, who was also in your book club meeting, and he actually lives in Hackney, around the probably.
It's so lovely. I mean, the hobby world, it's a small pond that we all swim in, and us hobbyists. Um, so I wanted to, yeah, I've asked some of my friends for questions for you, Stuart, but I'm just gonna continue a little bit, just us chatting, because I think it's really intriguing and it's lovely. So from what you're saying, this game is kind of trapped in amber. It emerged, um, it's just been there as a game. Games Workshop haven't done anything officially to kind of boost editions, yet people have been building and making homebrews, I guess we call it, in D&D, expansions and things. So why do you
This is
think
true.
that this abandoned, captured in time game has taken on this kind of, afterlife?
It's a really nice way of describing it, the way you describe it, because the game itself, the narrative of the game, because of the fact it's sort of set in this imperial calendar year, as they call it, 1999 on the Warhammer timeline.
Mm.
It's actually the story of the game is that it's actually set in a period of history in Warhammer's history, and the timeline runs actually up until beyond 2550, where eventually the world ends.
Of course, yep.
These years are tracked since the birth of Sigmar Heldenhammer, who is himself a focal point of Warhammer lore from birth and beyond death, as he's worshipped as a warrior god. And he is an integral part of the Mordheim setting, because the comet fall which destroys the city of Mordheim in the province of Ostermark is actually linked to Sigmar, as the twin-tailed comet is a symbol of Sigmar, and the destruction of the city is heralded almost like an act of God, that
Mm.
the city has been smited by Sigmar and almost wiped off the map because it's decimated by this comet fall. What was the capital city of a province, of a realm, is destroyed and left in ruins, and that's kind of like the story, how it begins.
Yeah.
And these war bands descend upon the ruins to loot it, and two of the different factions in the story are
Mm.
both tied to the Church of Sigmar, but they
Oh.
are in competition with each other, because there's various different schisms within the church of this
Of
warrior god.
course there are. Of course there are.
So you have, and this was a nice way to introduce some of the personalities in the game, because the witch hunters, the
Mm.
Templars of Sigmar, are a holy order that are hell bent on their religious zeal and their doctrines of wiping out heretics and the unclean. But unfortunately, the other faction that is loyal to Sigmar have got drawn into
Oh no.
this massive plot, because although the entire city is in ruins, there's actually one location out of 20 locations that were on the map that is actually still standing. There's a place called the Rock, which is a fortress convent that's populated by warrior priestesses
Yay.
who are loyal to Sigmar. And so the Templars are effectively treating them as heretics as well, because
Ah,
they're still there. So
ah,
because they've survived,
it's a
they're
travesty. That's not fair.
kind of having the finger pointed at them as being sort of culpable in this sort of deadly massacre. So even though
Typical, typical patriarchy condemning the women who've managed to survive, the independent women.
it is unfortunately a, a, a patriarchy versus the matriarch of that holy order
Mm.
situation, this kind of conflicts that arise,
Yeah.
because at the time when the game was published, there wouldn't have been any witch hunters who were um, women at the time. So they have in various different kind of different pieces of source material. On occasion, there's been a witch hunter that's crept in, or a sort of like a warrior of Sigma,
Yeah.
who might be referred to as the Maiden of Sigma, or the Bride of Sigma.
Hmm.
And it's interesting in the stories to kind of see some of the reactions to that from the likes of warrior priests,
Yeah.
who kind of experience these kind of first-hand acts of heroism, um, and how they deal with that stuff. But
Mm.
this was obviously first tackled, and some of these sort of difficult subjects were tackled in this in this
Hmm.
game and this setting. But those are only two of the original factions in the game. There's in the original game there's 6 different war bands that you could collect the miniatures for and play the game with. So it wasn't just the Sisters of Sigma that the witch hunters were running around
No, well, it sounds like
fighting battles with.
oh, sorry. It sounds like very typical Grimdark. Firstly, absolutely destroyed wasteland with terrible things have happened. Then it's a bunch of people attacking each other to basically loot stuff and just get the good stuff. Um, yeah, sounds
The
people
good
being horrible to each other.
You say the good stuff in the game, the main resource in the game that players are trying to collect isn't actually treasure, although that becomes part of the feature of some of the expansions in the
Well,
game
isn't
when
it?
it's
Weren't you
do you
saying
know what it is? Are you gonna be able to guess what it is? This stuff?
I want you to
So
be
you've edited the
proud of
document.
me. I think this is going to show me for being really lackadaisical. I think the treasure is good for when you're um leveling up your equipment or using it to buy resources, maybe. And
It is, yeah.
is the treasure shards of the comet?
It is, yeah. So it's
Yay!
like it's like magic rock crystal that's come from the comet.
Yeah.
Um, and been split up into these shards. And in the general Warhammer fluff, it's referred to as warpstone. In
Yes.
Mordheim, it's referenced in this earlier time as weirdstone because the actual the dangers that are attached to this stuff hasn't really fully been realized by this point. So
Oh
it's just
dear.
like, it's just like spangly
Yes. I
magic
mean,
rock.
that that part of the game appeals to me because I really love shiny things. So if I was to imagine how I'd find why my warband would be in this setting, it'd probably be quite a lot of very vain rogues who just saw the shiny stuff and wanted to go and collect it. So I can
Yeah,
see that happening. But
magic
what?
crystal that turns out to be flesh altering
No.
um, dark magic
Well,
stones.
I've learned about the dangers of that because I was just reading the Ravna trilogy with Ian. And in
Hmm.
Ravna, if a shard of, warp glass goes into you, basically a demon will come and take over your body and wear you like a puppet. So I'm very aware, obviously, outside of the games, I know that warp things are very terrible, but I can
That
imagine.
sounds like a best case scenario of what might happen if you touch this stuff.
Oh gosh, good to know. Yeah, I mean, I often think just wouldn't survive in the Grimdark in any world. Um, One thing I found interesting is it's a fantasy game, but as somebody, my main background, my huge love is Dungeons and Dragons, and you said, Mira, there are no dungeons. Sorry, there are no dragons in Mordheim. Why are there no dragons?
What, just like one sort of keeping its lair there, just hiding gold under
I know.
the city.
I don't know. I mean, I guess a big pull for me to play fantasy games is so I might stumble across a dragon or a Medusa or a unicorn. Unicorn would obviously be choice number one. But I guess that's the difference when you're playing deep fantasy, when you're playing a game where players really want to be strategic and skirmish, there's not a lot of space for like mythical beasts turning up. Like, what would a minotaur do? They'd just get in the way of the attacks or something.
Luckily, after the rulebook was originally released, the game was so popular that additional content um, it was in demand. So
Mm.
they did release initially like a supplement that explored the wilds around the city. Um,
Ooh,
and then they did bring out a magazine as well. So there was a magazine that had lots of cool articles and new scenarios that you could play. I mean, the additional material, it's just like once you start looking at it, there's just loads of it. But
yeah.
I'm only going to mention this now, just get onto this now quickly because you said, but keep saying about dragons. And the um, in the Mordheim annual,
Mm.
which was released in 2002, there was one of the scenarios which is called Chaos on the Streets. Allows you to play like multiplayer battles. And one of the features of that was that there were certain beasts that were involved in the game, but because a full-size griffin or dragon would be powerful enough to wipe out multiple war bands, these beasts were actually sort of young versions of the beasts, and
Oh,
so there's a young dragon is featured in
oh,
the scenario called Chaos on the Streets. So you could actually get a dragon miniature
Stuart,
put into
thank you
play
so much. Thank you for
and
looking that up for me. A wormling.
battle
I
it,
love it.
or hopefully save it, depending on
Yeah, what your
what your
alignment is probably.
what your like what your motives are for your war
Yeah.
bands.
Um, I also think so. If I wanted to write a scenario for more time, could I write something and say, and I'm going to do a more time voice. In the destroyed chapel, you have heard rumors of a white steed. Could a mythical unicorn be in this chapel? Capture it in order to make contact with this beast that may be able to detect shards. Could I write a scenario like that?
I mean, maybe someone's already written a scenario with unicorns in and just hasn't shown anyone yet. I like to keep 2 unicorns in the top drawer of my modeling desk, just in case.
Yay! I
Just
think
these kind of special
everyone should
occasions.
everyone should keep unicorns in the top drawer of their modeling desk. I think let's make that a rule right now.
I keep 2 because I had this term recently. Keep these 2 unicorns. One to rock, one to stock. That's what I heard someone say. So I've got one unicorn, so that the heroes of my Amazon warband can mount this fake creature and ride it into battle, and then the other one I'll of course need sort of on its own, so I can use it in Mira's Mordheim scenario.
Yay! One to rock and one to stock. I like it. So let's talk about Sigmund Helmenhammer.
That
How
is not
say his name, say his name again.
don't let the witch hunters hear you pronounce his name
Okay.
that way.
I will.
Otherwise, they may smite you down.
No smiting. I'll run away on my unicorn.
So
So
he does. I'm
sorry.
just having a look to see if he features anywhere in the original artwork. I don't think he does, but the original box art for Mordheim by Jeff Taylor. Hopefully, I'll just hold this up in the right position.
Oh, it's a little bit
Might be a bit.
shiny.
Is it too shiny? Is
Oh
it
no, if you
reflecting?
hold it still, I can see a guy in the center wielding a great axe and a sword.
Okay, that's not Sigma, but
Okay.
this is the original artwork for the Mordheim box set that when it came out, which people still scramble over copies on eBay to get the original cardboard buildings and a copy of the rule book.
How much would
But
that be
Jeff,
worth? Sorry to interrupt your flow of thoughts. How much would it be worth on eBay?
I've no idea.
Okay. I'll
Some
look that
some
up.
some some couple of £100 or something, a few
What?
£100, something like
Okay.
that.
You could buy 2 boxes of Gloomhaven for that. Not that we would. Um,
I think if you tried to buy sort of Frosthaven, the new Gloomhaven, isn't that
oh yeah,
that's
yeah,
probably
yeah.
going to set you back about £400 at the moment, isn't it? Because it's
Oh,
just shipped.
I won't
And it all
do
becomes
that.
a bit confusing here with some of these games as well, because you've got Frosthaven, and then we
Yeah.
were talking earlier about Frostgrave,
Yeah.
and then you've got Gloomhaven, and then you've
Yeah.
got Beastgrave, which is something else to do with Warhammer. I don't
Yeah.
know if there's a Beasthaven or I don't know. It starts to become a bit confusing because there's so many different like names of these kind of games
Yeah.
and expansions where they're all kind of variations on a theme.
Well, maybe you and I should write Beasthaven, and God knows
Yeah,
what it will be.
that might be one you can copyright.
Yeah, Beasthaven. I'll sort out the OGL, which is very topical at the moment. So
And maybe Gloomgrave as well. You could do that.
Gloomgrave, I like that. So can you please say the man's name, the god's name, so I can get it right?
Okay, so it's Sigmar Heldenhammer,
Heldenhammer.
who is
Okay.
the warrior god. So his name is obviously used, invoked quite a lot by the witch hunters, especially
Yeah.
in 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 their dialect. I smite thee in the name of
Of
the holy
Sigmar.
Heldenhammer, something like that. They might
Yes.
say. They
And
refer to him as Sigmar, but also as the Heldenhammer. That's another
I
way of announcing.
what a great nickname. Who's coming? Are you coming down the pub? Yeah, Heldenhammer's down there already. And uh so how is Sigma Heldenhammer related to the Emperor? Or is it completely separate, not in the universe at all?
Uh, they are sort of related, but not sort of blood relatives, I think.
Okay.
In terms of like the you've got a different emperor though in Warhammer Fantasy Battle than what you've got in Warhammer 40K. So in
Oh,
what
I didn't know that.
in Warhammer Fantasy,
Yeah.
there are lots of different continents and realms, of which the main one that a lot of the action revolves around is called the Empire. And the Empire is a group of provinces which includes the League of Ostermark, which is where Mordheim was before it
Yeah.
was destroyed. Then
Ah,
later in the timeline, the city of Beckhafen becomes the capital city of that province. But even though each of these provinces has a ruling elector count,
mm,
who all are give fealty to the emperor of the realm. Sigmar Heldenhammer was the original uniter of these different provinces, which at the time were kind of really no better than tribes of barbarians. And
okay.
so he became the uniter, the unifier of the empire,
Mhm.
and the first emperor. And then over the years, there have been many other emperors that have followed him,
Okay.
and the main emperor at the time of Mordheim would be Magnus the Pious. Is talked about a little bit in the lore because there were key events during this time, but these emperors aren't related to the emperor in 40K or Sigma. They're not
Oh,
blood descended from him, because the, the crown doesn't pass through blood as it does in other some settings.
yeah.
I suppose I imagine there are perks to being the son of an elector count, to being born a noble rather than a simple rat catcher.
Yeah.
But a lot of when you say the emperor in Warhammer Fantasy Battle, most fans of the game will not think of Magnus the Pious. They'll think of Karl Franz, because in the core period settings of Warhammer Fantasy Battle for years, he has
Mm.
been the Grand Prince of Altdorf in the Reichland and the reigning emperor, and is a master tactician, warrior, and statesman. So he has no rival in the realm for his crown.
But are they godlike?
In the end times stories, which is when you have the cataclysmic final showdown
Hmm.
of the forces of chaos descending upon the realms of men, dwarves, and elves. There are certain events that take place which connect. It's like a massive spoiler if you ever kind of come across to read any of this, but there's certain events that kind of there are certain events that connect certain key personalities
Okay.
in the game, and the lore to personalities who are deities in
Oh,
the lore.
cool. Okay.
Um, and the way this happens and takes place ties into magic, and the winds of magic which blow through the world, and all magic itself is connected to chaos. And
Yeah.
so this takes us neatly back round to Weirdstone, which is like the raw physical substance of magic, kind of made physical in a physical
Mm.
form. So it's kind of the raw stuff of chaos, which is connected to magic and these
Oh,
winds.
thank
So
you.
yeah,
This is
there's
fun,
all kind
isn't
of
it?
these kind of like loose connections.
Yeah. So for you personally, because you kind of spent, I mean, let's say a lifetime um adding to the adding to the legend really, because you've written your own supplements and scenarios, and you've got this blog that seems to me to be the point of information on the internet. So what does the game mean to you, and why do you love it so much? Is it your favorite game?
So I suppose it is my number one tabletop experience. I mean, I really like board games and card games, and I've been sort of heavily invested in various different activities over the years. But I always come back to Mordheim. Unfortunately, by the time I kind of came to the game, the official kind of magazines and things that like the town criers
Yeah.
that were published with additional material around the time. Unfortunately, all of that stuff had kind of reached the end of its life cycle, as
Mm.
the product was still the game was still supported at the time when I started playing, but by the point I kind of had got roped in deep enough to be thinking about contributing to the game, the magazines that they used to do, and there's all sorts of old mags like Town Crier was the Mordheim magazine, but there were like stories in Inferno and Warhammer Monthly
I'll hold it
that
still a
included
second.
that's a Sister of Sigma
Cool.
on the front there.
Yeah.
This is actually a crossover. This is a crossover of a Warhammer 40K character written into Mordheim. They did like a crossover mag where they made 40K characters,
Oh, I
fantasy
love that.
characters, and vice versa.
That's like when She-Ra,
And then there was
yeah, when She-Ra characters go into the He-Man universe. I love that stuff.
and Fanatic magazine was kind of like that was the last magazine that they did where there was
Mm.
content for the specialist games. So Blood Bowl, which was more recently re-released, Battlefleet
Mm.
Gothic, Necromunda, Mordheim, um,
Yeah.
and War Master and Epic. So those mags kind of they finished. I think they finished doing them in maybe 2006. I
Okay.
think this was.
And what and
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 then
yours
they kind of
just
moved the support onto like an online platform. So they had this thing called Fanatic Online. So this was like old school web forums and stuff where people
yeah.
used to go onto web forums and you could kind of access the content there. So this was the point where I actually started to kind of contribute. So um, the last official supplement for the game, I got roped in and became involved in because of
Okay.
just meeting people at the time.
Yeah.
And there was a big summer Warhammer fantasy campaign written by the now one of the studio design chiefs, Andy Hoare, who's currently working on the new 40th anniversary Warhammer the Old World game. And he wrote this summer campaign called the Nemesis Crown.
Okay.
And somehow it was decided that there should be a Mordheim supplement
Ooh.
to to be released so that the players who played Mordheim could get involved in this big summer campaign. And one of the gentlemen that was part of the kind of the rules review team that worked on the errata and the kind of tournament rules for the
Mm.
games. I met this chap at a kind of a big Warhammer campaign crossover weekend event, and I went to actually I was attended and recruited to actually deal with the rules for the game with the ships, which was called Man of War. But I ended up being quite heavily involved in marshalling and refereeing in the Mordheim activity as well. And this gentleman, Ian Davies, was kind enough to remember me afterwards and say, "Oh, we're writing this Mordheim supplement. Do you fancy getting involved?" So I ended up getting involved in writing this supplement, which at the time in like 2007 is like, this is when everyone was kind of using Yahoo groups to get their work done, kind of thing. Like, so there was a Yahoo group, and it had all these kind of like all these guys that were like, to me, this is like all the Mordheim rock stars that I knew at the time, apart from
Yeah.
Thomas wasn't involved himself. The leads were Ian, who was part of the rules review team, another author who was a freelancer who wrote a lot of the content for Town Criers and the annuals, who was based in the States, a guy called Mark Havener. And then there were some other guys that had kind of done content for the Town Crier magazines and some of the kind of the official supplements, which revolved around visiting different realms in the Warhammer world, like the jungles of Lustria and the deserts of Kemri. And so Terry Maltman and Tommy Muller, all these guys were roped into this project. And so I was kind of just this like new guy. And then
Yeah.
there were all these other guys, John Seven, other contributors. There was probably about, I think it was like 9 of us or something like that.
Wow.
Um, and it and it
And
kind of was going to get published. So I was quite excited, like this thing's going to get published. It's not probably going to be
yay.
in white, it's not going to be in White Dwarf, but it's like, going to get published.
It's
And
gonna
because
be canon.
they stopped doing the Fanatic mags, so
No.
it meant that it was just going to get published online. So I was like, oh, that's still good because like it's going to be on the website.
Yeah.
People are going to be able to download it. And then at the last minute, they kind of came to us and said, we're just going to have to put it on the website as a Word document because we just don't have the resource. We don't have the manpower to edit and do layouting or anything like that.
Oh
So
no.
everyone was like really gutted, but I came up with a plan at the last minute because I'd started speaking with a guy that was doing his own Mordheim supplement that he was writing himself, and it looked amazing. Like it read amazing. The way it read was beautiful. He had lots of cool concepts to introduce, and he had these kind of new kind of factions and stuff. So I started speaking to this chap called Christian Templin, who lived in Bremen in Germany,
Okay.
and he he kind of jumped on board at the very last minute to
Mm.
help me with the editing. And he said, I'm going to do the whole thing, lay it out, do all the graphics, and make a PDF. So in the space of about a week, because there was literally no deadline to get this done,
Mm.
we had we had a PDF. It was a bit kind of like warts and all because like there was going to be mistakes
Yeah.
because of the
Yeah.
deadline, but we got like this really really nice looking PDF, and Games Workshop were kind enough to accept it, and the specialist games staff put it online as they said they were going to do. So it was released as part of the release, and we were lucky enough to kind of I managed to get hold of a copy of Andy Hoare's Warhammer campaign pack before it was released to the public because
Yeah.
I had friends that worked in managed stores and stuff like that,
Of
so
course you
they had the
do.
stuff
Of
they had the
course you do.
stuff before the customers. So one of the store managers was like, "Well, don't tell anyone I gave you this," and I got a copy of this document. So we actually managed to, in the writing and development process, kind of key a lot of stuff
Hmm.
to the um to the Warhammer pack as well. So it all tied in properly with the lore.
Yeah. So was that what hooked you in? They kind of invited you to be part of a creation, and then Mordheim got into your heart, and you kind of just had this Mordheim itch ever since. Is that how it captured you?
I started going to these campaign weekend events that were held
Mm.
from time to time called Euro GT, which stands for just get together. And it was guys from all over Europe meeting in locations. Sometimes it was Warhammer World and Nottingham. On a document I sent you, we all met up at a Butlins, and like it was all set
Yay.
up in a Butlins.
Lovely.
And there were some events abroad, and it was because I attended this event and I was more kind of exposed to the game being played as a role-playing game rather than as a tournament.
Mm.
And that's where I fell in love with it, because I don't really I didn't sort of want to do any more kind of tournament activities at this point. I played Magic the Gathering and, Blood Bowl, and done all that sort of stuff in tournaments. So to play a game that was like an RPG game played with my minis collection,
Mm.
this was like this is hobby heaven for me. And I came away from these every time I come away from these Euro GT events, I would want to kind of paint a new warband, and get more ideas about how I was going to run a campaign at home. So it was kind of just this kind of culmination of these different experiences where I got out on the road and went and met up with some people that I'd never met before, I
Well,
suppose.
I think it's really lucky for us that we've managed to woo you in with the creativity of the role play, because I mean, there's so many. From my very brief dip into Mordheim additionals, there's some really lovely ideas around and lots of creativity, which kind of makes it more than let's our team will bash your team. And in the essay that we were looking at, you were talking quite a lot about what you can do between bashing each other and how you can kind of, buy things to enhance your war bands and things. But I need to be a little bit disciplined, Stuart, because I feel like you and I are having a lovely chat, but I'm recording this and I've got questions for you from other people,
Oh,
believe it
great.
or
Far
not.
away.
Okay. So this is from Eric Weir, he's one of the guys that I do edit 28 magazine with. And he's fantastic. And he's also one of my patrons. So he asked this question as soon as I said I was going to talk to you. And you've mentioned the game Necromunda. So Eric says, how do you think Wartime built upon the game which came before, Necromunda? And is it a better game for the changes? So he's saying Necromunda was the basis for more time. Is that a controversial point? Has he stitched me up?
I didn't think it is the basis for Mordheim at all. I mean, I'll probably get into all sorts of trouble for anything I say here, because just in defense of my own personal biases, probably what I should say is that I'm not really a 40k guy. I probably know more about 40k than most people that aren't into 40k,
Mm,
because all my mates play 40k, and all my friends that play Mordheim with me are actually all 40k guys. So Mordheim actually has a special place, as a game and a system for guys that play 40k. A couple of my friends that play 40k are interested in Necromunda, but most of them don't play Necromunda, but they do all play Mordheim, and they love
wow.
Mordheim. And Mordheim is what Mordheim has in common with Necromunda is they're both tabletop skirmish games um, which are set in the Warhammer universes,
Uh-huh.
and they both use some sort of campaign-based activity to create a sort of continued week-to-week experience,
Mm,
for kind of building a story. But I'm not sure how much of a narrative game
mm,
Necromunda is, because I've not been, directly involved in it myself. Whereas Necromunda's about these groups of warriors battling with gangs, Mordheim is about these war bands, and I like to
mm.
think of the war bands as an opportunity for anyone that wanted to collect an army and failed, that they can still use their miniatures. So your
Yes.
failed army can become a war band. Not all of the war bands are military organizations. So there's a lot of there's obviously a lot of military themes to
Mm,
Warhammer 40k and Necromunda. There's a lot of weapons where you're firing at range. Mordheim is not really like that so much, because although you do have missile weapons,
mm,
there's more kind of combat, um, than there would be missile firing in the game.
More
And
melee.
there's definitely a lot more melee involved, and there's more different sort of scenario objectives and things that you'll be looking to achieve beyond just trying to shoot and kill the other team kind of
Yeah.
thing. So in Mordheim, you do have certain factions, like in the core rulebook, you've got 3 different mercenary groups that you can
Mhm.
use. So these are kind of soldiers and hirelings, men for hire, from the Reichland, Middenheim, and Marienburg,
Mm.
um, and um, and these kind of represent the kind of the military side of the game's history.
Mhm.
The other factions in the in the core rulebook for Mordheim are the cult of the possessed. So these are heretics and demon worshippers. Um, and
I
these
mean, they are
cultists,
labels, but they're just trying to go about their daily lives. But yeah,
they
carry on.
are these, they've just got a cult. They're trying to mind their own business,
Yeah,
collect a bit of weird stone, some summon a demon. I mean,
that's all.
some of these themes aren't actually sort of explained in terms of the rules in the rule
Yeah.
book, but this is where all of these lovely articles that have been published over those years in Town Crier, they give
Mm.
you the different tools that you need to make these dreams a reality.
Yeah.
And the undead is obviously got vampires involved because the borders of Sylvania, which is the cursed
Well,
province
it's not their
that
fault.
they live in.
They're just mortally challenged, aren't they? The undead.
They
To-
just happen to be quite close to Mordheim. It's unfortunate that bits of Comet also fell in Sylvania,
Yeah.
and you've got these vampires and they're hungry. I always feel like something I'll just quickly say. One of the interesting character progression themes in Mordheim of having these heroes who are going to gain experience points and level up in the
Mhm.
campaign, which you I guess you do similar things in Necromunda too, but the the kind of the weakest of some of these characters are the younger ones, like the young bloods they call them,
Mm.
and they're just like young warriors. But in Sylvania, they have these characters called dregs, which are kind of like like your lowly sort of servants and hunchbacks who
Oh, bless
they haven't
the
yet been
Eagles.
worthy enough to receive the blood kiss from their masters, and they're just kind of going around doing their bidding with a shovel and a crowbar,
Mm.
and they refer to as dregs. So I'm very sort of affectionate towards these kind of like
Yeah.
lesser characters. They're the sort of characters that you'd want to role play. You'd want to be these guys or meet them,
Yeah.
and they really kind of sum up a lot of what Mordheim is about because they kind of capture the spirit and the character.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I quite like playing the underdog, and then, as they level up and get more experience, you feel like you're giving them a better life. So I think what I'm learning is neither of us are too fussed about Necromunda. Maybe I'll do a let's talk Necromunda and learn more about it. Um, but thank you for answering Eric's question. And I love that little tour as well of different kinds of warbands. And I've got more questions from Twitter. So I'm just going to very unprofessionally switch my screen so I can read it. So the first question is Thomas Parker says, if you were making more time today, what would you change and what would stay the same?
So this thing we talked about it being trapped in amber, this is one of the best features of this game.
Yeah.
The fact that it has its original rule set subject to rules, countless rules reviews, errata, house rules that players like to bring into the game, other material that you can kind of add. So it's kind of like it feels kind of modular because the game is based on, um, like I said, the chassis of the rule set is 5th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle.
Yeah.
So if you're going to have a new edition, it would inevitably end up being based on the chassis of a later edition of the game.
Mm.
I'm a big fan of the earlier editions of of Warhammer, which just kind of, you know, like this bit of a sort of a generation thing, maybe showing your age or
Are
whatever.
you a
But like,
grognard, Stu?
I mean, when I first played the game, it was the third edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battle,
Okay.
and a lot of the stuff that's kind of like I remember as being like the fun stuff and the good stuff from there
Yeah.
was sort of gradually sort of like changed, removed, some of it improved over the years.
Mhm.
So by the time we got to kind of fifth edition, I think I would have played that edition um, quite a bit. I would have
Mm.
played a lot of the fourth edition, a fair bit of the fifth edition, and probably like 2 games with sixth edition, and then not really been involved beyond that because I think like I got to the point with it where I hung up my general's spurs
Mm.
for leading armies and just kind of like focused on this leading war bands behind enemy lines, conspiracies, and I think the only thing that in terms of like going beyond where the original game went, um, that I would like to see kind of maybe expanded if the game was kind of like revisited. I wouldn't like to see the kind of the chassis changed. I'd like to kind of like keep the game as it
Mm.
is. There's there's so little that I would kind of want to change. And really the only thing that I think adds more to the original vision and design of the game is this idea of kind of exploring scenarios more with more variation of win
Mm.
ways to kind of win a battle. And this is all stuff that's been covered in supplementary material anyway. So
Mm.
it's kind of like there's nothing that doesn't exist somewhere on the internet that I think you need that doesn't exist. It's
Yeah.
it's it's kind of all there. So
That's a beautiful answer, Stuart. You're basically saying this game is complete to me. I have what I need. So that's a lovely answer. Thank you. Are you ready for your next question?
okay.
Okay. The next question is from someone on Twitter called AnarchoFliss, and they've asked favorite warband and why.
So it's anyone that knows me knows that my favorite warband is the Norse.
The
So
Norse.
the
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 Vikings?
the Vikings of the Warhammer world. So
Okay. The
The
Norskins.
Norskins originally cropped up in Mordheim in an issue of Town Crier when a bunch of guys that were kind of doing supplementary material
Yeah.
started building a campaign set in the jungles of Lustria, the New World, the continent that is sort of loosely based on the South America's, and it's kind of like these cities of gold. These lizard men are kind of occupying these temples. There's loads of treasure there.
Mm.
Okay, this green hell is deadly, but
Mm.
let's get on a boat. Off we go. Let's hit El Dorado and get as much of this bling as possible. So
Excellent.
in the this is as far away as you could imagine from the icy realm of Norsca in the north
Yeah.
of the old world. But the Vikings, like the Norse of Warhammer, are the sort of preeminent seafaring race.
Mm.
And in the Warhammer lore, the Norskins actually originally discovered Lustria in much the same way as Leif Erikson in schools in America was taught as being the true discoverer um,
Mm.
of America. And so there's a character in Warhammer lore who's referred to as Lost Erikson, who uh, ac who accidentally discovers Lustria, um,
Amazing.
and then his son Leif Erikson goes there later, and eventually a settlement is established called Skeggy in Lustria.
Mm.
There's a new Warhammer role-playing book going to be coming out from Cubicle 7, who hold the license from
Hmm.
Games Workshop, all about Lustria and being able to role play in Lustria. So I can't wait to see this
Oh,
book because it's going to include more about Skeggy and this mythical character who's, I believe, is known as the Jacker King, who rules the settlement. Like literally nothing is known about him apart from his name has been mentioned. So this is
okay.
presumably they're fleshing out the lore and stuff. But this whole
Yeah, they've
more
got that
more
IP.
time
Let's use it.
this more time supplement set in Lustria came about, and the Norse were obviously there.
Mm.
There may have originally been some Norse mercenaries in Mordheim because they would have been kind of like hired
Mm.
swords that would have cropped up. So I really like this idea of there being a Norse warband. They've come from the land of of ice, sailed their ships across the Lustria, settled on the coast, established this kind of um, shanty town, and just gone off into the jungle, bare chested,
Yep.
um, picking up all sorts of diseases, sunburnt flesh. Off they go,
Yep.
and just battling with the lizard men. So as soon as this kind of came up, like I already had loads of kind of themed miniatures because Games Workshop in the 80s did actually produce sort of Viking style miniatures,
Mm.
and I'd collected all these. So I was kind of like doing conversions for them. And over the years, my collection, using Norse in Blood Bowl as well, and kind of collecting different stuff for Norse. I've probably got about 5 Norse war bands, not even just one, because it's like
Well,
it's like an army's worth of
you
these
need
guys.
you need one to rock and four to stock, Stuart.
I d- I've got more Norse miniatures that I would love to paint, but I'm always getting kind of there's so many different projects and different
Yeah.
opportunities of things I could be painting.
Well,
So I've got some kit bashed guys that nobody's seen that if I painted them, put them on the table, I'm sure people would run a mile.
well, thank you for giving me some of your precious hobby time to have a chat with me. I really, really appreciate it. I'm going to ask you some quick facts. So when I'm explaining to Ian what more time is, I've got some facts to throw at him. So in the
Okay,
original published game More Time, you could choose from 6 war bands, did you say?
that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Um, the combat is more melee than missile-y.
Hmm.
Um, essentially, they're all chasing around after magic crystals like weird stone, warp stone, amethyst, rose quartz, which is valuable. Um, the the main emperor person's name is not Sigmund Helmenhammer, it's Sigma Heldenhammer,
Sigma Heldenhammer is the warrior god
the warrior god.
is who is worshipped in the
Okay,
in the Empire.
got it. Um, without Tumus and Rick, this game would not have been made.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Correct.
And the name of the blog that you wrote is called Libra Malefic.
Liber Malefic.
Malefic. So I don't think I've done too badly after our conversation. What do you think?
I think you've got enough information now to to choose some miniatures. But if you need further inspiration, I would just direct you to the art of Mordheim because the the kind of the maps and the artists that have kind of contributed to create
Mm.
these these visions of Mordheim. This based on the the kind of the pitch that two of us must have had of this kind of grim, dark setting
Mm.
where there's kind of just so much peril. There are kind of like there's always like some almost tragic and comic aspects to Warhammer Fantasy. It's not a comedy, but there's kind of like almost like black comic themes, and all this kind of darkness, faith, desperation, and humor in even measures is distributed through the pages of the rule book. The book and all of the associated material is decorated with the illustrations of John Blanche, Dave Gallagher, John Wigley, Carl Kopinski, Paul Smith, Alex Boyd, and not to mention the cover art by Jeff Taylor of the box set, and then
Okay.
all these kind of snippets of maps which were done by Nuala Kennedy.
Wow. Stuart, thank you so much for dropping all those names, because I know there will be people listening or watching who will want to go and explore that. And I'd written down Jeff Thomas, so I would have definitely steered them in the wrong direction. Um, Before we go, I just was going to say, people will probably ask or write in comments if we get this up as a video, what are the books that we can see in your background? The black ones with the black spine and the gold writing to your right, I think.
Oh, okay, they're probably not any of the Mordheim ones because I've got some on the bed here. So the ones behind me,
Yeah.
with the black spines, are all Warhammer roleplay books, which
Oh.
originally these would be like probably I think I've got a couple of the first edition ones, the original books, but then there are a lot of the second edition books which were released in the early noughties, and then the fourth edition, which is the third edition, wasn't pen and paper role
Mm.
playing, so I don't have that stuff. I've got like one book from that, but there's so many good second and fourth edition Warhammer role playing books with sort of there's tons of lore. There's so much lore in those, and I've kind of gathered those up
Yeah.
um, just over the years, and just kind of enjoy reading them. I've only played a little bit of Warhammer roleplay.
Yeah.
My did it quite a bit in lockdown, obviously, because
Mm.
couldn't do a lot else. But
Mm.
yeah, those are just like the role playing books. If at some
Oh,
point I can kind of get some friends together on Zoom or Google Meet, I might have a go at trying to GM
I think you should.
something. But I've never, I've been an organizer and a writer for a lot of Mordheim campaigns, but
Yeah.
I think it's having played in a role play environment, and Warhammer role play is a lot more technical than D&D.
Yeah, I've heard.
So it's not as kind of as visceral as D&D. It's more about the kind of the conspiracies. And so yeah, might give that a go at some point. But if I do that, I think what I was going to do, my landlord is involved in my flatmate. He's a lot involved in a lot of different systems, and he's played all four versions of Warhammer role playing. So we were kind of discussing that I would kind of like come at, for anyone that knows Nightmare, I was going to maybe come at it as Treyguard and tell the
Oh,
stories,
yay.
and kind of lead the narrative, and then he was going to kind of come in as Lord Fear and kind of play
Yes.
all the NPCs and kind of
Mm.
like ham up all that and
Yeah,
take
well,
care
don't
of all
forget
the combat.
Pickles the Goblin. I could pop in, be
Yeah, we could
Pickles.
get some special guest star NPCs in, so and then let the players kind of do their thing whilst,
Mm.
'cause I don't like the idea of having to manage all of that kind of administration, because ultimately
Yeah.
role playing is very admin heavy, all the sheets and forms. In Mordheim you've got the roster sheets for your
Mm.
warband, so it's kind of like that's like it's like doing administration in a campaign.
Yeah.
But for anyone that kind of enjoys that, the kind of the pen and paper aspect
Mm.
of of gaming, Mordheim kind of takes a bit of that from Warhammer Roleplay, which
Good
is
to
which
know.
is which is a deeply immersive, engrossing pen and paper
Yeah.
role playing game where I
So,
understand you need to spend 2 hours of planning for every hour that you're going to play.
well, you know what they say, the games master is never short of friends because the games master is doing all the work for everyone else. But if people wanted to kind of get in touch with you or see what you're up to, where can they find you online? Or are you more of a like a please don't hassle me, I'm a private person?
I'm always getting tagged in the Mordheim Facebook group about stuff to do with the Border Town burning
Mm.
supplement that I worked on with Christian Templin, and anything to do with Marienburg, because I've kind of done a lot of player aids
Yeah.
and articles about getting players to enjoy playing with boats on docks,
Mm.
stealing cargo and all that sort of stuff. So the Facebook group's fine. Obviously, on the blog you can kind of leave comments as well, so I'll
Mm.
sort of see those. Yeah, but I get pestered a little bit on there, and that's absolutely fine. Everything used to go down on a forum called Tom's Boring Mordheim Forum, and that was like the cool place to kind of have all these interactions and share your updates on things you were developing, miniatures you were painting, terrain you were building, and all that took place on that kind of old school forum for a number of years in the noughties. And then I guess it's kind of as trends have changed, it's now all migrated to Facebook.
It has. Well, thank you for being present on Facebook, and thank you so much for being present here. So I'm going to say goodbye for the tape, but if you could hold on for our post tape admin, that would be great. So thank you so much, Stuart, and I say goodbye.
Thank you for editing my article.
No
That's
problem.
hopefully coming out in 28 magazine this
It
year.
will. It will.
Excellent. Thanks.
Okay.